Do you know what it feels like when the floor beneath you suddenly disappears? One moment you're standing tall, holding a dream that finally became real. The next, you're falling into darkness, pushed by the very hands you trusted most. That night began so ordinary. The hum of traffic outside, the faint smell of fried onions drifting from a neighbor's window. My own heart beat louder than both. I had a gift bag in one hand, the kind with tissue paper sticking out, crinkled from the drive. In my purse, folded neatly, were the contract papers, $6 million, a number I had stared at for so long it didn't feel real anymore. And yet, in that moment, it was mine. The city lights of Los Angeles had followed me home, bouncing off the windshield, whispering like they knew something I didn't. I pulled into the driveway, shut the engine off, and sat there for a breath longer than I should have. I pictured the look on my mother's face when she realized her daughter had made it. The way my father might actually stand up, put his hand on my shoulder, and say the words I had craved my entire life. "I'm proud of you." I wasn't looking for money from them, I never had. What I wanted was recognition, proof that all the sleepless nights, the failed auditions, the side jobs where I served coffee with a fake smile, they weren't wasted, that I wasn't wasted. So I stepped inside with a heart wide open. "I have something to tell you," I said, trying to sound casual, but my voice shook like a violin string. My mother looked up from the sink, dish towel in hand. Her eyes narrowed as if she was bracing for bad news. My father folded his newspaper slowly, like the print mattered more than I did. And Jason, my brother, leaned against the counter with that same smirk he'd worn since high school. The one that said he'd always be 2 steps ahead of me. "I signed the contract," I said, the words rushing out before I could second-guess them. $6 million. It's official. I'm in the film. The silence that followed was heavier than any applause could have been. No gasps of excitement. No, we knew you could do it. Just air thick enough to choke on. Jason broke it first. He laughed. Not the laugh of someone proud. Not the laugh of someone surprised. It was the kind of laugh that sharpens itself on your skin. $6 million? For you? That's cute. My chest tightened. "It's real," I said quietly. "I have the papers." "Papers don't make you talented," he cut in, his voice dripping with disdain. "You think you're some big star now? You'll screw it up like you screw up everything." I turned to my parents, waiting for them to step in, waiting for one of them to defend me, to say something, anything. My mother shook her head, lips pressed thin. "Maybe don't get ahead of yourself, Sarah. These things, they can fall apart." "And my father?" He just sighed, eyes sliding back to his folded paper like it held the answer I never would. The gift bag in my hand suddenly felt ridiculous. I set it down on the table, the tissue paper rustling too loud in the quiet room. "I thought you'd be happy," I whispered. Jason's laugh grew louder, echoing off the kitchen walls. "Happy? How does it feel to be the family's joke with a paycheck?" I don't remember the exact words I said back. Something about respect. Something about how hard I had worked. But I remember the heat rising in my chest, the sting of tears I refused to let fall. The room spun with tension, every second pulling us tighter into a knot I couldn't untangle. I walked toward the staircase, needing space, needing air. Jason followed, his footsteps heavy behind me. "You think you're better than us now?" he hissed. "I never said that," I snapped, turning to face him on the landing. My pulse pounded in my ears. "I just wanted you to be proud." And then it happened. A shove. Not playful, not accidental. A deliberate push that sent my body flying backward. The world flipped upside down. My head slammed against the edge of a step. White-hot pain exploded through me, then nothing. Just black. Do you know what it feels like to wake up and realize your entire world has changed in a single breath? I didn't know it then. Not yet. But that fall, that moment, was the line that split my life in two. Before and after. Before, when I still believed blood meant loyalty. After, when I would learn just how wrong I was. And the last thing I remember before the darkness swallowed me whole was the sound of my mother's voice, sharp and cold. She brought this on herself. When I opened my eyes, the first thing I noticed wasn't light. It was the smell, the sharp bite of disinfectant, the sterile chill that clung to the air. Machines hummed softly somewhere behind me, their beeps steady, indifferent. I blinked, and the ceiling above me swam into focus. White, endless, empty. I tried to move, but my body screamed in protest. A bolt of pain shot through my back, sharp enough to steal my breath. My mouth was dry, lips cracked. I reached for water that wasn't there, and that's when I realized I was alone. No mother clutching my hand, no father pacing nervously in the corner, no Jason pretending to care. Just me, a hospital gown, and the ghost of a family I thought I had. The nurse came in, kind eyes but practiced tone. "You've been out for 2 days," she said. 2 days. I had been floating between life and death, and no one in my family had cared enough to be there when I opened my eyes. "Has anyone visited?" My voice broke on the last word. She hesitated, glanced at her clipboard. "Your boyfriend called every hour. He's been here when he could. Your director stopped by. But your family—" She trailed off, leaving the sentence unfinished. She didn't need to finish it. A hollow ache spread in my chest. I wasn't surprised. Maybe I should have been, but I wasn't. Some part of me had always known their silence was louder than their words. Still, lying there with IV lines tethered to my arm, it cut deeper than any broken bone. When Alex walked in, relief washed over me like sunlight through storm clouds. His hair was a mess, shirt wrinkled, eyes red from lack of sleep. He didn't try to hide it. He grabbed my hand and pressed it to his lips. "You scared the hell out of me," he whispered. I wanted to tell him everything, about Jason's shove, about the look in my mother's eyes, about the sentence that echoed like poison in my head. She brought this on herself, but the words stuck. I wasn't ready, not yet. Instead, I told him about the pain, about the nurse, about how thirsty I was. He laughed softly, poured water into a cup, held the straw to my lips. The small gesture nearly undid me. It was so simple, so human, and it was more than my own blood had offered. Later, when Lisa came, she tried to keep her voice upbeat. "The studio knows," she said, pulling a chair close. "They've paused the contract until you're stable." "They want you back, Sarah." "They're not giving up." Paused, not canceled. Relief mixed with dread. My dream wasn't gone yet, but it was hanging by a thread. And my family? They weren't just absent. They were vultures circling. 2 days later, Alex found out my debit card had been used. Withdrawals from an ATM near my parents' house, thousands gone. He told me gently, but there was no way to soften the blow. The people who had pushed me, who had left me alone, had also taken what they could from me while I was unconscious. That was the moment the contract in my purse, the one I had carried home like a golden ticket, turned into something else entirely. It wasn't just proof of success anymore, it was bait. It was the reason my own family saw me not as a daughter, not as a sister, but as a prize to be claimed. And lying there in that sterile room, machines humming around me, I realized something with a clarity that stole my breath. I hadn't just broken bones on those stairs. I had broken the illusion of family. The contract was signed, my dream was real. But the life I thought I was building? That was broken in ways no cast, no surgery, no paycheck could fix. You don't forget the sound your body makes when it hits the ground. It's not just the crack of bone or the thud of flesh against wood. It's the silence that follows, the split second when the world seems to pause, deciding whether you'll rise again or not. I don't remember the fall in detail. My mind has blurred it into flashes. Jason's face twisted with anger, my mother's lips tightening into a thin line, my father pretending not to notice. And then the rush of air, the spinning staircase, the sharp edge that greeted my skull. After that, nothing but darkness. But when I pieced it together later, I realized something chilling. That shove wasn't an accident. It wasn't a stumble or a slip. It was deliberate. And it wasn't just Jason's hands that pushed me. It was years of resentment, years of jealousy, years of being told I was never enough. The hospital staff filled in the blanks I couldn't. A neighbor had called 911 after hearing the crash. My parents told them it was an accident, that I'd tripped. Jason nodded along, eyes downcast, playing the role of the concerned brother. They didn't ride in the ambulance with me. They didn't wait at the ER. They went home, left me to fight for my life while they planned their next move. And I, lying unconscious, became a story they could shape, a fragile, voiceless thing they thought they could control. When I woke up, the pain in my body was unbearable, but the real agony came later, when I discovered the truth. My phone had survived the fall, cracked but still functional, and tucked in the audio app, unnoticed until Alex found it, was a recording. A pocket recording that had captured the argument, the laughter, the sneer, the shove. And then, faint but clear, my mother's voice. She brought this on herself. Hearing it was like reliving the fall all over again. But this time, I wasn't confused. This time, I knew. I tried to imagine what kind of mother could watch her child crumple at the bottom of the stairs and feel nothing but cold blame. What kind of brother could push his sister not just physically, but off the edge of a life she had fought so hard for? And what kind of father could fold his paper, close his eyes, and pretend none of it happened? For days, I replayed that recording, each listen carving the betrayal deeper into me. I wanted to smash the phone, to silence their voices, but I didn't. Because somewhere inside, I knew it wasn't just evidence. It was the truth I needed to face. The push had changed everything. Not just my career, not just my body. It had rewritten the story of who my family was. Or maybe it hadn't rewritten anything at all. Maybe it had simply revealed what had always been there. Jason's shove wasn't just about me. It was about every audition he mocked, every eye roll at dinner, every time he called me delusional. It was about the resentment that had been building since we were kids, when he was the golden one and I was the dreamer. And my parents' silence wasn't silence at all. It was consent. It was complicity. That realization hurt more than any fracture. Bones heal, bruises fade. But knowing that the people who should have protected me had chosen to destroy me, that wound had no cast, no bandage, no cure. I thought about the contract, the one I had carried home like a beacon, $6 million. To me, it had been proof that my dream was real. To them, it had been nothing but a trigger, a spotlight that showed them exactly what they thought they'd never have. The push changed my body. The push changed my future. But most of all, the push changed my faith. I no longer believed that blood guaranteed loyalty. I no longer believed that family meant love. And maybe that was the most dangerous fall of all. The fall from believing I belonged to them. Because from that moment on, I understood. I didn't. The first thing I felt wasn't pain, it was emptiness. A kind of hollow silence that pressed down on me harder than any broken bone. My eyes fluttered open to a blur of fluorescent light, and for a moment I thought I had woken in a dream. The ceiling stretched blank and colorless above me. Machines hummed with a rhythm that didn't match my heartbeat. I tried to shift to sit up, but my body betrayed me. Pain radiated through my ribs like fire. My legs felt foreign, heavy, as if they no longer belonged to me. I reached out instinctively for comfort, for a hand, a voice, a familiar face. But there was nothing. No mother clutching my hand, no father pacing with worry, no brother leaning in to check if I was still breathing. Just me, strapped to wires and tubes, a fragile body lying in a bed too wide, too white, too empty. I tried to call out, but my voice cracked into nothing more than a dry whisper. My throat burned, my lips stuck together. A nurse appeared, calm and efficient. She checked my vitals, adjusted my IV, smiled the kind of smile you give a stranger you'll forget by the next shift. "You're awake," she said gently. "That's good. You've been out for a while." "How long?" I croaked. 2 days, she replied. 2 days. 48 hours lost in darkness, and in all that time not a single family member had been by my side. I forced the question, though I already feared the answer. "Has anyone come?" The nurse hesitated, glancing at her chart. "Your boyfriend. He's been calling, visiting when he can. Your director stopped in. But your family?" Her voice trailed off, unfinished. She didn't need to complete the sentence. I heard it loud enough in the silence. Tears stung, but I refused to let them fall. Crying wouldn't change the truth. I had been abandoned, left behind not by strangers, but by the people who had raised me. Later, Alex walked in, and for the first time since the fall, I could breathe. His hair was messy, his shirt wrinkled, his eyes rimmed red with exhaustion. He grabbed my hand like it was the only thing tethering him to the earth. "You scared me," he whispered, his voice breaking. I wanted to tell him everything, the push, the laughter, my mother's cruel words echoing in the dark. But I couldn't. The betrayal felt too raw, too poisonous to spill into the air. Instead, I asked for water. He held the straw to my lips, steady and patient, and in that small act of care, I felt more love than I had ever felt in my parents' house. The truth hit me harder than the staircase ever had. Waking up wasn't the hardest part. Waking up to emptiness was. Because in that emptiness, I realized something devastating. My family hadn't forgotten me. They hadn't been too busy or too far. They had chosen not to be there. And in that choice, they told me exactly what I meant to them: nothing. I used to believe absence was accidental, that when someone didn't show up, it was because life got in the way, traffic, work, exhaustion. But lying in that hospital bed day after day, I learned the truth. Absence can be intentional. It can be sharper than a blade. My phone sat cracked on the nightstand, rescued from the wreck at the bottom of the stairs. When Alex finally charged it, the screen lit up with dozens of missed calls and messages. None of them were from my family, not one. Instead, there were alerts from my bank, withdrawals, transfers I hadn't authorized, thousands disappearing from the account I had so carefully protected. The account tied to the contract, the very thing I had been so proud to show them. Alex showed me the receipts, his voice low, like he wanted to spare me. "It was your parents' neighborhood," he said. "The ATM cameras will confirm it. I'm sorry. Sorry." Such a small word for such a gaping wound. They hadn't just left me unconscious. They had taken what they could, like scavengers circling a body. I stared at the ceiling, trying to imagine their faces. My mother, sliding my debit card into her purse without hesitation. My father, looking away, pretending it wasn't happening. Jason, smirking as if it was all a game. I kept asking myself, wasn't I enough before? Wasn't blood supposed to matter? But the answer revealed itself in every dollar they withdrew, in every day they stayed away. To them, I wasn't a daughter or a sister. I was a bank account, a paycheck, a name they could exploit until it dried up. Lisa visited again, dropping off flowers from the studio. "They're pausing the contract until you're stable," she explained. "They still believe in you." Her words were warm, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. To the studio, I was an asset. To my family, I was a resource. And in that hospital room, for the first time, I realized neither of those things had anything to do with love. The family I thought I had, they didn't just vanish physically, they vanished morally, spiritually. They stripped away the illusion that blood guaranteed loyalty. Late at night, when the machines beeped in rhythm with my aching body, I replayed the memory of Jason's shove. The way my mother's voice cut through the chaos. She brought this on herself. Those words weren't just cruel. They were a confession, a declaration that in their eyes, I had never been one of them. I closed my eyes, the room spinning with betrayal. My chest rose and fell with shallow breaths, each one heavier than the last. And in that emptiness, I made myself a promise. If they could vanish when I needed them most, I would learn how to live without them. Recovery is a strange thing. It doesn't happen in a straight line. One day you can sit up, sip water, and almost believe you're fine. The next, a wave of pain knocks you back into bed, reminding you how fragile you really are. The doctors spoke in clinical terms, fractures, rehabilitation, therapy schedules. But none of that captured the truth of what I was going through. My body was bruised, yes, my bones were fractured. But what no one could see was the deeper break, the one inside me, the crack where trust used to live. At night, I would close my eyes and still feel the shove. My muscles tensed at shadows, at sudden noises, at the memory of Jason's smirk. Fear lived under my skin now, but alongside it, something else began to grow. A quiet, stubborn resolve. Alex stayed by my side. He read scripts to me, the words filling the silence my family had left. Lisa brought notebooks, encouraging me to jot down thoughts, even if my hands shook. At first, my notes were messy lines of anger, scribbles that barely formed sentences. But as the days stretched into weeks, those lines turned into pages. Pages turned into chapters. Slowly, I began writing the story I thought I'd lost. Physical therapy was brutal. Every step felt like dragging a mountain behind me. The therapist pushed me harder than I wanted, and I hated him for it in the moment. But afterward, when my muscles trembled and sweat stung my eyes, I felt something shift. Weakness was giving way to strength. Not loud, not dramatic, quiet strength. The kind that grows in silence, when no one is watching, when you have no choice but to fight. It was in those moments, pushing against resistance bands, scribbling shaky words in a notebook, hearing Alex whisper, "You've got this," that I realized I wasn't powerless. My family had tried to break me, but they hadn't finished the job. One night, Alex leaned against the bed, eyes serious. "Sarah," he said, "you need to think about the future. They're not going to stop. Not after what they've already done." He was right. The withdrawals, the lies, the silence, it wasn't random. It was calculated. My family had shown me who they were, and it was time I believed them. I pulled out my cracked phone, scrolled to the recording again, Jason's laugh, the shove, my mother's voice cold and sharp, proof, evidence. Not just for me, but for anyone who needed to hear the truth. In that moment, I decided recovery wasn't just about walking again. It wasn't just about writing again. It was about reclaiming my story, about taking back the voice they had tried to silence. The pain was still there, the fear was still there, but for the first time, so was a plan. I would heal my body, I would strengthen my spirit, and when I was ready, I would face them, not as the broken daughter they left behind, but as the woman they could never destroy. There's a different kind of fear that settles in your chest when you know you're about to face the people who tried to destroy you. It isn't like stage fright. It isn't even like the fear of falling down a staircase. It's heavier. It crawls into your bones and whispers, "They'll be there. They'll see you. They'll hear your voice. And they'll try to take it away again." The courthouse in downtown Los Angeles looked nothing like the theaters I used to dream of. No red carpets, no flashing cameras, just stone steps, wide doors, and echoes of lives unraveling inside. My heart thudded harder with each step I took toward those doors. Alex's hand brushed mine. Lisa walked on the other side, carrying a folder so thick it looked like a weapon. In some ways it was. I had spent weeks in recovery, building quiet strength. Now it was time to test it. Every physical therapy session, every night I replayed the recording, every page I wrote in that shaky notebook, it all led here. When we walked into the courtroom, the air shifted. There they were. My parents sat stiffly at the defense table, eyes fixed ahead, refusing to look at me. Jason leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, a smug half-smile glued to his face. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. This was the same smirk he wore when he called me wannabe. The same smirk he wore just before the shove. The judge entered and everyone rose. My knees trembled, but I forced myself upright. I wasn't just standing for the court, I was standing for myself. The prosecution began with the facts, the fall, the injuries, the withdrawals from my account, the recording, held like a key waiting to unlock the truth. My name echoed through the room, each syllable a reminder that I wasn't invisible. When it was my turn to take the stand, my mouth went dry. The microphone crackled as I leaned in. "My name is Sarah," I began, voice shaky but clear. "And I need you to know what happened to me." I told them everything, not with bitterness, but with honesty. The contract I signed, the night I came home with a gift bag and hope in my chest, the silence that met me, Jason's laughter, my mother's sharp words, my father's heavy sigh, the shove, the darkness, the emptiness when I woke up alone, the withdrawals, the betrayal. As I spoke, I didn't just see the jury's faces. I saw Jason shifting in his seat. I saw my mother's jaw tighten. My father's hand trembled, gripping the table. They hated that I was speaking. They hated that I had survived. Lisa played the recording. The room froze. Jason's laugh spilled out of the speakers, followed by the sound of my body hitting the stairs. And then my mother's voice, cruel and unshaken. She brought this on herself. The jury looked horrified. The judge's brow furrowed. The silence after the playback was suffocating. Jason's lawyer tried to twist the narrative. "It was an accident," he insisted. "Families argue." Words are said in anger. That doesn't make them criminals. But it wasn't just words. It was intent. It was action. It was abandonment. The prosecutor pointed to the ATM footage, showing my parents withdrawing cash while I lay in a coma. He held up the receipts. He played back Jason's text messages, mocking me to his friends the same night I fell. Each piece of evidence stacked higher, like bricks in a wall closing around them. And as all of it unfolded, I sat there with my hands folded in my lap, breathing slowly, reminding myself that I was no longer the girl on the staircase. I was the woman telling her story. The courtroom setup wasn't just legal, it was personal. It was me reclaiming space in a room they never thought I'd walk into again. When the judge called for recess, I leaned back in my chair. Alex squeezed my hand. Lisa whispered, "You're doing great." But inside, my chest still ached. Because no matter how strong I sounded, no matter how convincing the evidence was, there was still that little girl inside me who had wanted nothing more than her family's pride. And now, the only thing she had was proof of their betrayal. I'll never forget the moment our eyes finally met. Courtrooms are supposed to be formal, impersonal spaces. But when I looked across the room and saw my family sitting there, it felt like the world shrank into a stage built just for us. My mother's face was pale, but her lips were pressed so tightly together they looked carved in stone. She wouldn't look directly at me. My father stared at his folded hands, pretending to be absorbed in the grain of the wooden table, as if staring hard enough might erase me. And Jason leaned back, arms crossed, his smirk growing wider the longer I sat in that witness chair. It was strange how much you can read in someone's eyes. My mother's gaze flickered, quick and sharp, every time the prosecutor mentioned the recording. My father's eyes darted toward the jury when they showed the ATM withdrawals, a flash of shame he tried to bury. And Jason? His eyes told me everything I already knew. He wasn't sorry. He wasn't even afraid. He was angry that I had survived. The judge called for order, and I could feel every head in that room turn toward us. I shifted in my seat, feeling the weight of their stares. To them, this wasn't just another case. It was a story about loyalty, betrayal, and the kind of darkness people hide inside their homes. Lisa leaned close and whispered, "Don't look at them. Look at the jury." But I couldn't help it. My whole life, I had wanted my family to see me. And now, here they were, seeing me in a way none of us had ever imagined. The prosecutor asked me another question. "Sarah, how did you feel when you realized your family had taken money from your account while you were in a coma?" My throat tightened. I could have answered with anger, with fury, but instead I told the truth. It felt like dying twice. Once when I fell, and again when I woke up and realized the people I trusted most saw me as nothing more than a wallet. Gasps rippled through the room. I caught my mother's head drop slightly, her shoulders sagging. For the first time, she looked smaller, like the weight of what she'd done was pressing down. Jason rolled his eyes, muttering something under his breath. The judge snapped, "Silence in the courtroom." Jason smirked again, but the mask slipped. Beneath the bravado, I saw it, the crack of panic, the shadow of fear. That was when it hit me. They weren't invincible. For years I had believed they held the power over me. But sitting there, speaking my truth, watching their faces falter under the light of evidence, I realized the power was shifting. Slowly, steadily, it was coming back to me. When recess was called, I stood to leave. The bailiff guided me past the defense table. For a brief second, I was close enough to hear my mother whisper, "Why are you doing this to us?" The words burned hotter than any wound. "To us?" I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I kept walking, head high, heart pounding, because I finally understood. Their faces in that courtroom weren't the faces of family. They were the faces of strangers who had chosen greed over love, pride over honesty. And yet, even as I turned away, I caught myself hoping for something. An apology, a flicker of regret, even just a tear. But all I saw was stone, silence, and a smirk. The jury had seen enough. The evidence was clear. But for me, this was about more than the verdict. It was about the moment I looked my family in the eye and finally stopped waiting for them to be what I needed. When the testimonies began, the air inside that courtroom grew thick, like everyone was holding the same breath. I sat with my palms pressed together, waiting, knowing the next voices to speak would either build my case higher or chip away at it. The prosecutor called the first witness, a neighbor who had heard the crash that night. She walked up, her steps steady but her voice trembling slightly as she took the oath. "I heard yelling," she said, eyes flicking toward Jason. "Then I heard a loud thud, like someone hitting the stairs." I looked out the window and saw Sarah lying at the bottom. Her family was standing there, but no one moved to help. Not right away. The words landed like bricks. I could feel the jury shift in their seats, discomfort rippling through the room. Jason kept his arms crossed, his jaw tight, but his eyes darted for just a second, as if searching for an escape. Next came the bank officer. Calm, professional, she held up printed statements that showed the withdrawals. "These transactions occurred while Miss Sarah was hospitalized," she explained. "The ATM cameras confirm her parents were the ones using the card." Her tone never wavered, but the evidence spoke louder than any emotion could. I stole a glance at my father. His hands were clenched so tightly his knuckles had turned white. My mother shifted in her seat, staring down at the table as though the wood grain might swallow her whole. Then Lisa took the stand, my friend, my director, the person who had believed in me when no one else did. She adjusted the microphone and spoke with quiet conviction. Sarah was on the brink of the role of a lifetime. She worked for years to get here, and when she should have been celebrating, she was fighting for her life in a hospital bed. The studio believed in her, I believed in her. But her own family, they abandoned her. Worse, they tried to profit from her pain. Her words struck the room like a match to dry tinder. The jury leaned in. The prosecutor nodded, letting the weight of her testimony hang in the air. Finally, Alex was called. His voice broke when he talked about finding me in the hospital, how he had begged the nurses for updates, how he had discovered the withdrawals. She didn't just lose her health that night, he said, his eyes locking on mine. She lost the illusion that her family would protect her, and I saw the moment it broke her. That kind of betrayal, it doesn't heal easily. The defense tried to fight back. They painted the picture of a family overwhelmed, of accidents misunderstood, of arguments taken out of context. Jason's lawyer paced the room, insisting the push had been an accident, that words spoken in anger didn't equal intent. But the testimonies stacked one on top of another, each one a layer of truth too solid to ignore. The jury wasn't just listening, they were seeing. They were imagining me at the bottom of those stairs, alone. They were imagining money being drained while I lay unconscious. They were imagining silence where love should have been. And through it all, I sat still, letting the truth speak louder than I ever could. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let others shine a light on the darkness you've been forced to carry. When the prosecutor finally rested the case, the room exhaled. My heart hammered, but for the first time since the fall, I felt lighter. Not because the pain was gone, not because the betrayal had vanished, but because the truth was no longer mine alone to bear. It belonged to everyone in that room now. There's a moment in every trial when the mask slips. The polished speeches, the carefully crafted lies, the rehearsed expressions, they all start to crumble when truth pushes hard enough. That moment came like a storm breaking open the sky. Jason was called back to the stand. He walked with that same swagger, the kind that said he thought he was untouchable. His smirk hadn't left his face, not once. He sat down, leaned back, and answered the first few questions with clipped sarcasm. "Did you push your sister down the stairs?" the prosecutor asked. Jason scoffed. "It was an accident. She tripped." Everyone knows she's clumsy. The words stung, but not because they were true, because they were familiar. He'd been calling me clumsy since we were kids, using it as a weapon to cut me down whenever he could. Hearing it now, in front of strangers, felt like he was dragging our whole twisted family dynamic into the open. The prosecutor didn't flinch. He nodded to the clerk, who pressed play on the recording from my phone. The courtroom filled with the sound I knew too well. Jason's laugh, sharp and cruel, my gasp, the sickening thud of my body against the stairs. And then, my mother's voice, cold as ice. She brought this on herself. Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. Jason shifted in his seat. The smirk faltered. He tried to recover, stammering, "That doesn't prove anything." People say things in the heat of the moment, but the jury's faces told the story. They weren't buying it. Not anymore. The prosecutor pressed on. "So you expect us to believe that your sister tripped coincidentally at the exact moment you were mocking her? That she just happened to fall in a way that matched the sound of a shove?" Jason's face flushed red. He glanced at my parents looking for backup. My mother avoided his gaze. My father shifted uncomfortably, sweat glistening on his forehead. And then, like a dam breaking, everything unraveled. The prosecutor moved to the financial records, the ATM footage, the receipts. He laid them out one by one, like dominoes falling in slow motion. While Sarah was in a coma, money was withdrawn from her account. Large sums, repeatedly. The people making those withdrawals were not strangers. They were her parents. The footage played on the screen. My mother at the ATM, glancing over her shoulder. My father stuffing bills into his wallet. The jury's eyes widened. Murmurs spread across the room. That was the collapse. The moment their carefully built pretense of family concern shattered. My mother buried her face in her hands. My father's lips trembled as he muttered something no one could hear. Jason slammed his fist against the arm of his chair, anger replacing the smug confidence he had carried all this time. I watched it all from my seat. My body trembled, not from fear, but from something I hadn't expected. Relief. For years, I had carried the weight of their cruelty in silence, convinced no one would believe me. Now the truth was laid bare for the world to see. The defense scrambled, throwing out weak excuses, stress, misunderstandings, desperation. But their words fell flat. The jury wasn't looking at lawyers anymore. They were looking at a family stripped down to their ugliest truth. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel small in their presence. I didn't feel like the outcast, the unwanted dreamer, the clumsy girl. I felt strong, because the world finally saw them as I had always known them to be. The judge called for order as voices rose, but it didn't matter. The collapse had already happened. The pretense was gone. When recess was announced, I stood and walked out with Alex and Lisa at my side. Behind me, I could still hear Jason shouting, my mother crying, my father mumbling excuses, but none of it touched me anymore. Their faces, their lies, their masks, they had all crumbled. And in their collapse, I found something I hadn't felt in a long time: freedom. When the courtroom doors shut behind me, the noise faded like an old radio being turned down. Jason's shouting, my mother's sobs, my father's excuses, they became nothing more than echoes trapped inside four walls. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe. The sun outside was blinding. It warmed my skin, and for a brief second, I felt alive again. Not as a victim, not as the broken girl lying in a hospital bed, but as someone who had survived the storm and stepped out on her own 2 feet. Alex squeezed my hand as we walked down the courthouse steps. "You did it," he whispered. But I shook my head. Not yet. This isn't about winning in there. It's about reclaiming myself out here. Freedom doesn't come with a verdict. It comes in moments. The decision to no longer beg for love, the choice to stop carrying guilt that was never yours, the strength to draw a line that can't be crossed again. That night, I sat at my desk, staring at the blank page of a new notebook Lisa had given me. My hands still trembled, but I began to write. Not about contracts or roles or scripts for someone else. I wrote about me, about the fall, the silence, the emptiness, the betrayal. Each word was a piece of the weight I had been carrying, finally set down. With every page, I claimed back more of myself, my voice, my story, my future. It was quiet freedom, no applause, no spotlight. Just me in a small apartment, pen scratching against paper. But it was real. I stopped waiting for apologies that would never come. I stopped hoping for a family that didn't exist, and in that stillness, I found something better than their acceptance. I found mine. Freedom wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic. It was steady, solid, like the ground I finally stood on after years of feeling like it could vanish beneath me. And for the first time, I knew. I didn't need them to survive. I didn't need them to define me. I was enough. Freedom has a strange way of feeling unfinished. You think the verdict, the evidence, the truth finally spoken out loud will tie everything up with a bow. But scars don't disappear just because the wound is closed. Sometimes they echo. I was at home weeks after the trial, sipping coffee by the window when the phone rang. The number flashed across the screen, familiar and foreign at the same time. My parents' house? My chest tightened. For a moment, I thought about letting it ring until it stopped, but curiosity, that old weakness, made me answer. "Sarah," my mother's voice cracked on the line. "Why are you doing this to us?" The words hit harder than any shove. To us, as if they were the victims, as if their betrayal hadn't been carved into my bones. My throat tightened, but I stayed silent, letting her fill the air with excuses. We were under pressure. Jason didn't mean it. Families argue. Money gets complicated. You should understand. Understand? That was her plea. But all I understood was that nothing had changed. They weren't apologizing. They weren't acknowledging what they had done. They were rewriting the story, one where I was the villain for speaking the truth. I hung up before she could finish. My hand trembled, the coffee in my cup rippling like it had absorbed my anger. Alex walked in, concern on his face. "Who was it?" "My past," I said quietly. But the call echoed long after I ended it. At night, I heard their voices in my head, Jason mocking, my mother scolding, my father sighing in that heavy way that always made me feel like a burden, even free. I wasn't free of them, Lisa noticed too. "You can't let them keep renting space in your mind," she told me. But it wasn't that easy. The wounds weren't just memories. They were reflexes, flinches at sudden laughter, guilt at every small success, fear that any step forward might end in another fall. So I wrote. I filled notebook after notebook, pouring the echoes out before they swallowed me whole. Sometimes the words came out messy, angry, bitter. Other times they surprised me, moments of clarity, of strength, of reminding myself that the echoes were just that. Echoes, not chains. Healing didn't look like I imagined. It wasn't about forgetting. It was about learning to live with the sound of old wounds and choosing not to let them dictate my future. That phone call reminded me of something I already knew. Even when people lose in court, they'll still try to win in your head. And the real battle is deciding whose voice gets to stay. I chose mine. I thought the courtroom had closed the chapter. I thought the verdict, the evidence, the collapse of their lies would finally be the end. But betrayal has a way of circling back, wearing a different mask, knocking on your door just when you start to feel safe again. It began with another letter, official, heavy, the kind you dread opening, a lawsuit. My parents and Jason were suing me, claiming defamation, claiming emotional distress, claiming that by telling the truth, I had ruined their lives. I laughed when I first read it, a hollow, bitter laugh. But the longer I stared at the words, the less funny it became. They weren't giving up. They were coming back, dragging me into another battle, trying to twist the story until I became the villain in their play. Alex found me at the kitchen table, the letter spread out like a stain. "They can't win," he said firmly. "Not with the evidence, not after everything that's already happened." But winning wasn't the point. They wanted to drain me, to exhaust me, to prove they still had power over me, even after the trial stripped their masks away. Lisa joined us that night, her expression sharp. "We'll fight this," she promised. "But Sarah, you need to understand, this is psychological warfare. They're hoping you'll crumble before the truth gets another chance to breathe." The weeks that followed were a blur of legal meetings, depositions, strategy sessions. I hated every second of it. Sitting across from them again, listening to their lawyers paint me as vindictive, unstable, greedy. It was like reliving the first betrayal all over again. But then something unexpected happened. While combing through old files, Alex found a backup recording stored in the cloud, not just the shove. Not just the words she brought this on herself. This one captured a conversation afterward. My parents whispering in the kitchen, plotting how to spin the story, how to protect Jason, how to siphon money without leaving a trail. It was clear, cold, calculated. When our lawyer played it in the next hearing, the room froze. The mask they had tried to rebuild shattered again, this time beyond repair. The judge's eyes darkened. The jury, called in for pretrial motions, looked appalled. Their lawsuit crumbled in real time, their accusations collapsing under the weight of their own voices. But for me, the real shift wasn't in the courtroom, it was inside. That second betrayal, the audacity to sue me after everything, should have broken me. But it didn't. It hardened me. It reminded me that people who thrive on control don't stop when you expose them. They keep reaching, clawing, grasping for any last shred of power. And the only way to truly win isn't just to beat them in court. It's to refuse to let them own another piece of your soul. That night, I sat at my desk again, notebook open. I wrote one line at the top of the page. This ends with me. It wasn't just a promise to fight. It was a vow to myself that their games, their greed, their endless betrayals would not define me any longer. I wasn't just surviving them anymore. I was outgrowing them. There comes a moment when survival isn't enough. When you're done patching wounds, done waiting for the storm to pass, done hoping the people who broke you will magically become the people you needed. That moment came for me after the second lawsuit collapsed. I realized something. I had spent my whole life trying to negotiate with people who never saw me as an equal. I begged for pride, pleaded for approval, endured their silence, even survived their violence. And every time, I left the door cracked open, hoping they might walk back through with love instead of cruelty. But some doors need to be closed, and some need to be locked forever, so I drew the boundary, not in whispers, not in vague promises, in stone. I called my parents and Jason one final time. My voice didn't shake. "This is the last time you'll ever hear from me," I said. "You won't have access to me, my life, or anything tied to me again. You chose greed over love, betrayal over loyalty. That was your decision, and this is mine." My mother sputtered. "Sarah, you can't just erase family." But that's where she was wrong. Family isn't erased when you cut ties. It was erased the moment they chose to destroy me. All I did was draw the line around my own heart and say, no more. I blocked their numbers, changed my accounts, moved into a new place where their shadows couldn't follow. Each step was like chiseling words into stone. You don't own me anymore. For weeks, I felt lighter. Alex noticed it first. "You smile differently now," he said. "Like you're not waiting for something bad to happen." And he was right. Boundaries aren't walls that keep love out. They're shields that protect the love you deserve to give yourself. Still, some nights, I heard echoes, the smirk, the shove, the words she brought this on herself. But instead of letting them consume me, I reminded myself of the stone I had carved. Every time the echoes rose, I repeated the truth out loud. That's not who I am anymore. Lisa encouraged me to share my story beyond the courtroom. "You have a voice people need to hear," she said, and for the first time, I wasn't scared to use it. I spoke at a small community event, standing under dim lights, telling my story to strangers who leaned in with wide eyes. When I finished, the room filled with applause. Not because of the pain, but because of the power in choosing myself. That night, I walked home with a calm I had never felt before. My past no longer defined me. My boundaries did. Blood may have betrayed me. But my choices rebuilt me, and in that truth I found peace. Sometimes I wonder how different my life would be if that night had gone the way I imagined. If I had walked through the door with my contract, set the gift bag on the table, and been met with applause instead of silence. If Jason had clapped me on the back, if my mother had pulled me into her arms, if my father had said the words I had been chasing my whole life, "I'm proud of you." But that's not the story I was given. The story I was given was darker, messier, filled with betrayal I never thought possible. And yet, it's the story that shaped me into who I am now. I look back, and I no longer see the fall as the end. It was the beginning, the moment the illusion shattered, the moment I learned that family isn't defined by blood, but by actions, by presence, by love that shows up when you're at your weakest. I see now that freedom didn't come from winning in court, or even from drawing boundaries in stone. It came from reclaiming my voice, from telling the truth, no matter how ugly, and refusing to carry the shame that wasn't mine. People sometimes ask me if I regret taking them to court, if I regret airing the ugliness for the world to see. My answer is always the same: no, because silence protects abusers, not survivors. And I refuse to be silent ever again. The notebooks I filled during recovery now sit stacked on a shelf. Pages covered in shaky handwriting, blotches of ink where tears fell. I don't hide them. They remind me of the journey, of the girl who thought she couldn't take another step, and the woman who proved herself wrong. Alex tells me I'm stronger now. Lisa says my story inspires others. Maybe they're right. But for me, it's simpler. I'm not living for their approval anymore. I'm living for me. For the girl who wanted to be seen, and for the woman who finally realized she doesn't need anyone's permission to shine. If you've ever been betrayed by the people you trusted most, you know how it feels to wonder if you'll ever stand again. I want you to hear me. You will. It won't be easy. The echoes will linger, the scars will ache, but you are not defined by their cruelty. You are defined by how you rise. That night on the stairs could have ended me. Instead, it began me. So here I am. Not the daughter they abandoned. Not the sister they mocked. Not the victim they wanted me to stay. Here I am, alive, free, and unbroken in all the ways that truly matter. Because blood isn't family, love is, choice is. And the choice I make every day is this: to live without fear, to draw my boundaries with courage, and to never let betrayal write the ending of my story. That ending belongs to me.